Hello, my friends. It's October 22nd, 2024, and this is five big stories for today. So, we're going to start here talking about Russia and their relations with, Moscow is no longer able to continue a war against Ukraine without external assistance from North Korea, Iran, and China, according to the Deputy Permanent Representative of the United States to the UN. His name is Robert Wood. I think that's a pretty fair analysis of where Russia is right now. They really need those allies. Allies may be written light, but that's why Putin is at the BRICS summit talking like this, quote, "I am convinced that by working together cohesively, we will make the world we live in much safer and much more harmonious," he said at the BRICS Parliamentary Forum. His Russian subordinates look strained listening to this, but let's just look at what he said. "I would like to remind you that the main goal of Russia's current chairmanship in the organization is to create the most favorable conditions for the progressive development of all its members. I am convinced that by working together cohesively, we will be able to achieve the maximum realization of the economic, investment, technological, and human potential of our countries. Strengthen the constructive influence of BRICS on global processes, and make the world we live in much safer and much more harmonious." Well, okay, this is really what you should be focusing on here. Strengthen the constructive influence of BRICS on global processes, because he really wants to change the world order. Now, Vladimir Putin will use the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, to try to show that the Western efforts to isolate him have failed. That's the goal here. So expanding the BRICS makes him less of a failure in that sense. But what exactly is the summit likely to achieve? It's probably not going to achieve a whole lot. Now, if there is an agreement like that agreement with North Korea, that would be stunning. That would be devastating. But we're not going to see that, I don't think. Okay, now, let's talk about Russia and China and their relationship. China has become the main buyer of Russian gas over the past 9 months, according to Bloomberg. Gazprom exported 23.7 billion cubic meters of natural gas to China in January through September. That's almost 40% more than in the same period in 2023, according to Bloomberg's calculations. China has surpassed Europe in this indicator, as well it should, because Europe should be getting off that dole. In July, Bloomberg reported that Europe and China are alternatively becoming the largest buyers of Russian gas and competing as the main sales market for Gazprom, and that's absolutely horrible that Europe's involved. But China is just soaking up as much as it can. Now, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, okay, so China really get something from Russia, but they don't need Russia in the same way that Russia needs China. And I've said this a number of times, but Russia was the older brother and China was the younger brother. And over time, it's gone like this. But it changed mostly because Russia has been destroying itself. And Russia is only, if Russia thought it was the big brother as the Soviet Union, as Russia, it was really barely there, if at all. Now, I got this idea from Putin's World. Angela Stent will be speaking at my university, the author of this book, in a few days. And I thought, well, I ought to read the book because I'd like to converse with her. But what's the GDP of Russia? Let's look at that. So the GDP of Russia is $2 trillion or so dollars. That's the GDP of Russia. Okay, now I want you to guess, what's the GDP of China? Just talk to the screen, nobody's looking, that sort of thing, right? $17 trillion. So it's no contest between the two countries. China is the big brother now, and Russia really needs China more than China needs Russia. Okay, more than 50 members of Congress signed a letter calling on the U.S. government to toughen sanctions on Russian oil and questioning an exception granted to a U.S.-based oil services company, allowing it to continue operating there. So cracking down on this from any angle, oil or gas, would be a very good thing, but there are loopholes and they get through them. Here's one of those loopholes. Russia's scheme to label its gas as Azerbaijani for Ukraine transit risks undermining EU sanctions. Like, wouldn't that be lovely? You can call it this, and that way it's not a problem. And Slovakia loves the idea. They're advocating for the plan. But that defies the whole purpose. Okay, doesn't she look delightful? You know who this is? This is Kim Jong-un's sister, who calls South Korea and Ukraine badly behaved dogs raised by the US. Delightful. Okay, let's talk about North Korea for a little bit. Russia appears to be scrambling to reduce its tensions with South Korea following credible reports of intensified North Korean cooperation with Russia, including South Korea and Ukrainian intelligence warning that a contingent of North Korean troops has deployed for training to Russia. So they kind of got something out of North Korea, but they're also inviting enemies. It's like when you're doing things with Iran, you got to know that Israel is not going to be happy with you about that. There's both sides of the equation, and they should have factored that in. North Korea calls the news about sending its military to war against Ukraine groundless rumors. Quote, "My delegation sees no need to comment on such groundless stereotypical rumors aimed at tarnishing the image of the DPRK and undermining the legitimate friendly partnership relations between the two sovereign states." This is according to the head of the DPRK delegation to the UN. He also emphasized that cooperation with the Russian Federation is legitimate. Okay, so nothing to see here. That's not happening. But even the United States government's having a hard time figuring out how to say, yes, it's happening. Because, and I got this from another prominent YouTuber. I'm not going to mention the name because this was in a private conversation. But this person said, yeah, you know, if they cross these lines, they have to do something about it, and they don't want to have to do something about it. Like the West has to do something about it, and they don't want to do it. The weakness out of Biden's press people trying anything to avoid admitting that North Koreans are now in Europe trying to kill Ukrainians. It's just incredible. And so this gentleman's asking at a press conference, and they're just tripping all over themselves, trying to answer without actually answering. Okay. Romania has quietly become one of Ukraine's most important allies. I thought, that's interesting. I don't hear a lot about Romania. So then I went to the Radio Free Europe article, read all about it. Okay, so they've had rocky relations over time, but you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That kind of thing's going on because they remember what Russia was like. Okay, never sworn enemies, but not the warmest of neighbors either. Bucharest and Kyiv are today probably closer than they have been in years, if not decades. The reason is Russia's full-scale invasion. They signed a 10-year security agreement in July, as did a number of countries. And with Ukraine trade routes cut off, Romania has become a key conduit for global markets for Ukrainian grains and other goods because they can go up the Danube or out across the land. Romania's strategic importance has been increasing tremendously since the beginning of the war. In fact, on October 3rd, Ukraine took possession of a Patriot air defense system from Bucharest. And so that's big. That's not nothing. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky, who personally thanked Romania for the delivery, has long appealed for more Patriot systems, arguing that they'll help his forces fight almost 3,000 bombs that he said Russia launches into the country every month. But unlike the Patriot delivery, much of the military hardware Romania has supplied to Ukraine is classified, so they're actually working together pretty well. Ukrainian pilots are training the European F-16 training center, which opened in November 2023 at a Romanian airbase. Romania has also announced plans to train Ukrainian Marines, and Romania's relations with NATO have accelerated as well. Romania's relations with NATO have accelerated. They're creating a NATO airbase in Romania. Moscow's not thrilled with that plan. The bigger the NATO base and the, quote, closer it is to Russia's borders, the more likely it is to become among the first targets for retaliatory strikes, said a Russian senator. Romania is used to such Russian threats, and hence the chumminess between Ukraine and Romania, just like Ukraine and Poland or Ukraine and the Baltic states. They know what Russia's like. In 2016, Russian President Vladimir Putin warned that positioning U.S. missiles in neighboring countries like Romania would lead to retaliatory measures from Russia. Now, relations between Romania and Ukraine, not all unicorns and sunshine. The two countries have had sometimes fraught relations, and public attitudes in Romania and Ukraine on Russia's war may be mixed. partly because of their history. Romania lost a northeastern corner of its country thanks to the 1940 Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and the two countries have tussled over minority rights. Romania has an estimated 151,000 ethnic Romanians living in Ukraine. But polling shows that Romanians back their country's inclusion in Western institutions, and this quote was, I think, spot on. Our interests are inextricably linked with Ukraine's. I think Poland sees it the same way. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia see it the same way. In fact, the closer you are to Russia, the more you seem to see this the same way. Okay. Michael McFaul talking about Vice President Harris. I talked about Trump yesterday, and some of you are like, why are you talking about Trump? Because he could be the president of the United States, and this is an important thing to understand what he's doing. Here we are with Vice President Harris. Vice President Harris once again signaled her unwavering support for Ukraine's fight for sovereignty, freedom, and democracy. Yesterday, in her 7th meeting with President Zelensky, she reaffirmed her position, quote, "My support for the people of Ukraine is unwavering. I have been proud to stand with Ukraine. I will continue to stand with Ukraine. I will work to ensure Ukraine prevails in this war." Okay, sounds like a pretty ringing endorsement. Now remember, Biden is saying these things and not necessarily supplying what he needs to do, so saying is not the same as doing, but we don't yet know what a President Harris might do that's different than Biden. So I was watching Greg Terry and Johnny Pierce talk about this morning, and we're going to listen to like a minute or two of what they have to say.
And I think she's been vice president. She's been around the world. She does the Munich security conferences. She knows what she's talking about internationally. And I would say she's definitely stronger than Biden. I think Biden has physically weakened. I think he is much more prone to anti-escalation in the vein of, say, Jake Sullivan. And I've said this before. Kamala Harris, if she wins, will have to differentiate herself from Joe Biden. So what does she do when she gets into a position of supporting Ukraine? She has two choices to differentiate herself from Biden. One is go in the Trump direction of appeasing Russia more. Or the other one, she's only got to, because she will do things differently. She said she'll do things differently. And Philip Gordon and people like Mark Kelly have said she'll do things differently. So she either goes in the appeasement direction or in a stronger support of Ukraine direction. She will not go in the appeasement direction. She has said that very openly. She has called Putin very overtly a murderous dictator. There's no way that she would go from calling him a murderous dictator to appeasement. So she will be stronger than Biden. How much stronger? I don't know. But she has to, any new leader, whether it's a football manager that comes in and takes over from the last person, you stamp your authority. You say, this is me and this is how I'm going to be different from the last guy.
Okay, so we're gonna stop there. So he says two positions. I say there's really three. There's go down a more appeasing path than what Biden has done, and I don't see that happening. Or the third choice is do exactly the same, say the strong words and not do as much as you would, it's very similar to Biden, or be stronger. So it's probably a choice between those two, say the same or be stronger, and it's yet to be determined what would happen if she's elected. Now, that leads us to the U.S. presidential election. The election only really matters in about 6, maybe 7 states. Now, I don't happen to live in one of those states. My state will reliably go Republican by more than 300,000 votes every time. So it doesn't matter what I do. I could vote for Mickey Mouse and it wouldn't change things. So what really matters is what happens in Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina and Georgia to some degree, although I think Georgia is probably a safe state for the Republicans. At any rate, this is where it really matters. Now, so there's 6 major swing states, and right now, according to The Hill, Harris holds a slim lead in 4 of those swing states, and Trump is pulling ahead in the other 2. So that's where we are. Now, I voted yesterday, and just so that you can stop saying, Gerdes, if you really care about Ukraine, you have to vote blue. I made my position clear, and I did exactly what I told you I was going to do. In fact, on my About page, I say this: I'm a Reagan Republican who fully supports Ukraine. I'm a conservative without a candidate to vote for in November, and I try to provide context to help you see what I see. Now, I'm not trying to persuade you about things. I'm trying to add context and help you understand what's happening in Ukraine. And you need to understand that Kamala right now is ahead in 4 of 6 states. We'll see what happens in 2 weeks. Okay, just for kicks and giggles, we'll look at this: the reasons why kids can't be left alone with their dads. Okay, my friends, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.